It was late autumn of 2025 when my friends Liam and Chloe and I decided to go for one last camping trip before winter truly set in. We chose a remote spot in the Blackwood Forest, notorious for its dense canopy and isolated feel. We'd been there before, but this time an oppressive silence hung in the air from the moment we arrived. The usual chirping of crickets and rustling of leaves seemed muted, replaced by a strange, almost breathless stillness. We set up camp as dusk bled into night, the air growing colder with each passing minute. Around the campfire, we swapped ghost stories, trying to lighten the mood, but even our own tales felt flat against the palpable tension of the woods. Later, after Liam and Chloe had retreated to their tent, I stayed up, nursing a final cup of coffee, staring into the embers. That's when I saw it. Movement in the tree line, about 50 yards out. At first, I dismissed it as an animal, perhaps a deer, but the movement was too deliberate, too tall. It was human-shaped, but impossibly thin, like a stick figure made of shadow. It stood perfectly still for a moment, blending almost seamlessly with the dark trunks, and then, slowly, it started to move parallel to our camp, staying just within the cover of the dense woods. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't make out any features. No face, no clothing, just a tall, gaunt silhouette that seemed to absorb the starlight rather than reflect it. It walked with a strange gliding motion, soundlessly. I wanted to scream, to wake my friends, but a primal fear rooted me to the spot. My breath hitched in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to be gone when I reopened them. When I did, it was closer, maybe 30 yards. Still just a shadow, but now I felt an intense, freezing cold radiating from it, despite the warmth of the fire. Panic began to set in. This wasn't a prank, wasn't an animal. This was something else. I grabbed a log from the woodpile, my hands trembling, ready to throw it, to make noise, to do anything. But then, it stopped, directly across from me, and slowly, unnaturally, it turned its head, or where its head should have been. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt intensely that it was looking at me. A wave of profound despair washed over me, a feeling of utter insignificance, as if my very existence was an annoyance. Then, a sound, not from the figure, but from the woods behind it, a soft, almost musical whisper, like dry leaves skittering on concrete. The shadow figure paused, seemingly listening, and then, with a speed that defied its previous languid movements, it melted back into the deeper darkness of the forest. The cold dissipated instantly, and I was left alone, shivering violently, staring at the empty space where it had been. The next morning, I tried to tell Liam and Chloe, but I couldn't articulate the terror. They saw my pale face, the bags under my eyes, and just assumed I'd had a bad night. We packed up quickly, and I never looked back. To this day, the memory of that hollow, silent figure in the woods haunts me, a chilling reminder that some things are better left unseen. My name is Sarah, and in June of 2025, my husband, Mark, and I moved into what we thought was our dream home. It was an older Victorian in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, beautiful, spacious, and affordable. Too affordable, in retrospect. From the moment we unpacked, I felt a peculiar sensation, like being constantly observed. Mark brushed it off, attributing it to the creaks and groans of an old house settling, but I knew it was more. The feeling was most intense in the master bedroom, especially at night. I'd often wake up to the distinct impression of someone standing at the foot of our bed, just outside the radius of the street lamp's glow. I'd blink, strain my eyes, and see nothing, but the feeling lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. One night, I saw it, a faint, shimmering outline, like heat haze at the foot of the bed. It moved, slowly, subtly, towards Mark's side of the bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, paralyzed with fear, not daring to move until morning light pierced through the curtains. Things escalated. Objects would move.
Keys would vanish from the hook by the door, only to reappear on the kitchen counter. Doors would swing open or slam shut when no one was near. Mark was still skeptical, but even he started to notice the strange occurrences. One evening, as he was downstairs watching TV, I was upstairs in the shower. I distinctly heard him call my name. "Sarah, you all right up there?" I replied, "Yeah, almost done." A few minutes later, I walked downstairs to find him engrossed in his show. "What did you need?" I asked. He looked at me, confused. "I didn't call you." My blood ran cold. The voice had been exactly his. We started setting up motion-activated cameras. For weeks, they captured nothing but us and our cat. But then one night, the camera in the hallway outside our bedroom recorded something that stole our sleep for good. A faint, translucent figure, tall and thin, glided across the hallway, passing right through the closed bedroom door. It wasn't a reflection, wasn't a trick of light. It was unmistakable, ethereal, and utterly terrifying. We watched it over and over, Mark's face as white as mine. The final straw came a week later. I was alone in the house. Mark was at work. I was in the living room reading when I heard a distinct, heavy sigh from directly behind me. It was so close, I felt the phantom breath on my neck. I froze, not daring to turn around. Then a whispered word, clear as day, right into my ear. "Leave." The voice was ancient, raspy, full of malice. I screamed, grabbed my keys, and ran out of the house, not stopping until I was safely in my car driving away. We moved out within the month. We never sold the house. We just abandoned it, forfeiting our down payment. The feeling of being watched never truly left me, even in our new apartment. Sometimes, late at night, I still feel that cold presence, a lingering echo of the house that watched and wanted us gone. I truly believe that house was alive, and it hated us.
As a long-haul truck driver for nearly 20 years, I've seen my share of strange things on the road, but nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to what happened to me on a stretch of Highway 80 in Nevada back in March of 2025. It was a clear, moonless night, just past midnight, and I was making good time on a run from Salt Lake City to Reno. The desert stretched out, dark and desolate on either side of me. I was approaching a notorious stretch known as Devil's Crossroads, a remote intersection with a few winding dirt roads leading to nowhere. As I neared the crossroads, I saw a figure standing by the side of the road, thumb out, a hitchhiker. This was unusual. There was nothing for miles. Still, instinct, or maybe just habit, made me slow down. He was a man, dressed in old, tattered clothing, a wide-brimmed hat obscuring his face. He looked anachronistic, like he'd stepped out of an old black-and-white photo from the 1930s. I pulled over, figuring he was just a stranded traveler. When he opened the passenger door, I got a better look. His face was gaunt, deeply lined, and his eyes, though shadowed by the hat, seemed to glow with a faint, disturbing red light. He smelled faintly of damp earth and something else, something metallic and rotten. "Thanks, friend," he rasped, his voice like grinding gravel. "Just need a ride to the next town." I nodded, suddenly uneasy. Something was profoundly wrong. I looked in my rearview mirror, and he wasn't there. I spun my head, and he was sitting in the seat, perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees. My blood ran cold. I swore I'd seen him get in the truck's passenger seat, not appear there. I shook it off, telling myself I was tired. We drove in silence for a few minutes. The air in the cab grew heavy, thick with that earthy, metallic smell. I could feel his gaze on me, even though he never seemed to move his head. I tried to make conversation. "Long way to walk out here," I said, trying to sound normal. No reply, just that heavy, unsettling silence. Then, I saw it in my peripheral vision. He shifted, not like a normal person, but like a puppet, stiff and disjointed. His head slowly, unnaturally tilted. And then he spoke again, his voice lower, more guttural this time. "They'll never find him." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Who won't find who?" I stammered, my heart thudding against my ribs. He slowly turned his head to face me, and the hat slipped slightly, revealing more of his face.
His eyes were not just glowing, they were completely red, like embers, and there was no pupils, just two burning orbs. His skin was pale and waxy, almost translucent, and I could see faint veins snaking beneath the surface. He slowly raised a hand, his fingers long and skeletal, and pointed out the window. He's still down there. Been waiting for a ride out for a long, long time. And then he let out a sound that wasn't a laugh, but a dry, rattling cough that seemed to emanate from deep within his chest. The smell intensified, sickeningly sweet and putrid. I didn't think, I reacted. I slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt, and yelled, "Get out!" He didn't move. He just stared at me with those burning red eyes. I ripped open my door, scrambled out round to the passenger side, yanking the door open. The seat was empty. The door was still closed. He was gone. The smell, however, lingered, strong and nauseating. I stood there, hyperventilating, staring at the empty road, my truck idling in the dark. I never picked up another hitchhiker, and every time I pass Devil's Crossroads, I feel a prickle on the back of my neck, wondering if he's still there, waiting for someone to give him a ride out of a long, dark wait.
My friends and I, avid urban explorers, decided in August of 2025 to finally tackle the infamous Blackwood Asylum, an abandoned psychiatric hospital with a grim history. Legends spoke of tormented souls and lingering malevolence. Of course, that only fueled our desire to explore it. We'd snuck in dozens of places, but Blackwood felt different from the moment we scaled the crumbling wall. The air inside was heavy, thick with dust and the unmistakable scent of decay. Light barely penetrated the grimy windows, casting long, dancing shadows. We moved through the wards, the patient rooms, the recreation halls, filming everything with our phones and cameras. It was eerie, but initially nothing truly terrifying, just the usual creaks, groans, and unsettling drafts of an old derelict building. Then we found the Whispering Gallery, a circular room in the oldest wing with unusually high domed ceilings. There were dozens of small padded cells lining its perimeter, their doors rusted shut. As soon as we stepped in, a chill permeated the air that wasn't just from the cold. A faint, almost imperceptible murmur filled the space. It sounded like dozens of people whispering, just out of earshot, chaotic symphony of hushed voices. My friend Leo scoffed. "Just the acoustics, guys, echoes bouncing around." But the whispers weren't echoes. They were constant, varied, and seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And then one voice broke through the din, clear as a bell, directly in my ear. A child's voice, small and mournful, saying, "Where's my mama?" I jumped, spinning around, but no one was near me. My other friend Chloe gasped, clutching her chest. "Did anyone else hear that? Someone just said, 'It hurts.'" Her eyes were wide with terror. Leo, who had been so dismissive, looked pale. I heard something too, like someone crying. The whispers intensified, no longer indistinct murmurs, but fragmented words, pleas and cries overlapping and weaving into a cacophony of agony. We were standing in the center of what felt like a vortex of despair. The temperature plummeted. I could see my breath. The air crackled with a malevolent energy, and I felt a crushing weight on my chest, like invisible hands were pressing down. Suddenly, the old, rusty cell doors around the gallery began to creak. Slowly, one by one, they swung inward, revealing absolute darkness within. We didn't see anything, but the whispers surged into screams, inhuman, gut-wrenching screams that echoed through the vast space. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated suffering. My heart seized. This wasn't acoustics, this was real. We didn't need to discuss it. We ran. We scrambled out of that gallery, past the crumbling wards, through the broken windows, not stopping until we were outside, gasping for breath, our hearts pounding like war drums. We never looked back. We left our cameras, our phones, everything. I lost a valuable lens that day, but I consider it a small price to pay for escaping that place. The Whispering Gallery wasn't just a room. It was a living, breathing testament to the torment inflicted within those walls, and a place where the echoes of suffering still cry out to this day.
I still hear those screams sometimes in the dead of night, and they make every hair on my body stand on end.
It was late November of 2025. I'm a night owl, often working on my laptop until the early hours. Around 2:30 a.m., my phone rang. It was an unknown number, and I usually let those go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. I picked it up, expecting a telemarketer or a wrong number. "Hello?" I said, my voice quiet. Silence on the other end. Not dead air, but a peculiar, heavy silence, like someone was holding their breath. I was about to hang up when a soft, almost imperceptible sound came through. It was a faint scratching, like fingernails on a dry surface. I held the phone away from my ear, glancing at the screen. The call was still active. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I asked again, a prickle of unease starting in my spine. The scratching continued, growing slightly louder, more rhythmic. It sounded like it was coming from a very small, enclosed space. And then a whisper, so faint I almost missed it. A woman's voice, raw and desperate, barely audible. "He's in here." My blood ran cold. I immediately thought it was a prank, but the voice carried such a chilling urgency, such genuine terror. "Hello? Who is this? What's going on?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. The scratching stopped abruptly. A long, drawn-out gasp, followed by a choked sob. Then another whisper, closer this time, clearer. "He knows you're listening." At that moment, I heard a new sound, distinct and horrifying. A guttural growl, deep and animalistic, came from the same line, clearly not from the woman. It was a sound of pure malice, of predatory intent. Then the woman screamed, a short, sharp, blood-curdling shriek that cut off abruptly. The line went dead. The call ended. I sat there, phone still in hand, my heart hammering. I immediately checked my call history. The number was still there. I tried to call it back. It went straight to a generic voicemail saying the number was not in service. I tried again. Same result. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I tried searching the number online, but it yielded no results, no associated names or locations. For the next few nights, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking threat. I kept replaying the sounds, the scratching, the desperate whisper, the woman's scream, and that terrifying growl. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something truly awful, something I was never meant to hear. About a week later, I saw a local news report. A woman had gone missing from a remote cabin about 200 miles from my city. Her car was found, but she had vanished without a trace. Her name was Maria. The report included a blurred photo of her. It was the same woman I imagined on the phone, her face etched with a silent plea. I never told anyone about the call. Who would believe me that I received a chilling, untraceable call in the dead of night, bearing witness to a horror I could only imagine? But I know what I heard, and the memory of that woman's last desperate whisper and the growl that followed still haunts my sleepless nights. Sometimes I wonder if she was calling for help, or if she was warning me, the unexpected listener, that he knew. This happened when I was 12 years old. My family lived in a large 2-story house in rural Pennsylvania, backed right up against a dense state forest. It was beautiful in the day, but at night, those trees looked like a solid black wall surrounding our yard. My dad worked late shifts at a manufacturing plant about an hour away, so my mom and I were often home alone until past midnight. My dad and I had this thing, a specific 3-note whistle. Whenever he came home late and forgot his keys, or if we were hiking and got separated, he would do that whistle. It was our signal. One Friday night in October, my mom was already asleep upstairs. I was in the living room on the ground floor, watching cartoons with the volume low, waiting for my dad to get home. It was around 11:45 p.m. I heard it. Hoo, hoo, hoo. The 3-note whistle. It came from the backyard. I smiled, figuring Dad had parked around the back to unload something or had locked himself out again. I jumped off the couch and ran to the back door.
which was a heavy wooden door with a small window at the top. I reached for the deadbolt, my hand gripping the cold metal latch. Hoo, hoo, hoo. The whistle came again, but this time I froze. Something was off. The pitch was slightly higher than my dad's, and the spacing between the notes was too perfect, too mechanical. My dad's whistle was always a bit airy. I hesitated. I pulled my hand back from the lock and stood on my tiptoes to peek out the small window. The backyard floodlight was off. It was pitch black out there. "Dad?" I called out, my voice cracking a little. Silence. Then, from the darkness right beside the door, not 5 feet away, a voice whispered, "Open the door, bud." My stomach dropped to the floor. It wasn't my dad's voice. It was raspy, scratchy, like someone trying to whisper while gargling water. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stared at the handle. Slowly, the doorknob began to turn. I had forgotten to lock the handle lock, but the deadbolt was still engaged. The knob turned all the way to the right, hit the resistance of the deadbolt, and then rattled violently. Thump! Someone threw their weight against the door. I didn't scream. I was too terrified to make a sound. I scrambled backwards, tripping over the rug, and crawled behind the sofa. "I know you're in there," the voice said, louder now. It wasn't whispering anymore. It sounded angry. Then the whistling started again, but it wasn't the 3 notes anymore. It was just a frantic, high-pitched screeching whistle over and over again, like a broken kettle. Hoo, 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 hoo. I army crawled to the kitchen phone and dialed 911. I whispered to the operator that a man was trying to break in. While I was on the phone, I heard the sound of heavy boots walking on the wooden deck. They walked away from the door and circled the house. I watched from the living room floor as a shadow passed by the large bay window. He was tapping on the glass with something metallic. Tink, tink, tink. He was testing the windows. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. As soon as their sirens cut through the air, I heard the sound of someone sprinting into the woods, crashing through the dry autumn leaves. When my dad actually got home 20 minutes later, he turned white when the police told him what happened. They found muddy boot prints on the back deck and scratch marks on the keyhole where the man had tried to pick the lock. But the worst part came a week later. My dad found a makeshift campsite about 100 yards into the woods behind our house. There were food wrappers, cigarette butts, and a pair of binoculars pointing directly at our back porch. The police said the man had probably been watching us for days, learning our routine, learning the whistle. This happened back in 2014. My parents were in the process of remodeling our basement and were selling a bunch of old furniture on Craigslist. I was 14 at the time, a freshman in high school. One Saturday morning, my parents had to run to the hardware store. They told me they'd be back in an hour and that nobody was scheduled to come by for the furniture until the afternoon. About 20 minutes after they left, I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I ignored it. I stood still in the kitchen, waiting for them to leave. The bell rang again, followed by a knock. "Hello, I'm here for the sectional," a man's voice called out. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. It was a guy, maybe in his 30s, wearing a baseball cap and a zip-up hoodie. He didn't look particularly scary, just a normal guy. I opened the door a crack, leaving the chain on. "My parents aren't home," I said. "You have to come back later." The guy smiled, looking a bit stressed. I know. I spoke to your dad on the phone just now. He said it was cool if I came early because I have to get to work. I already Venmo'd him the money." I hesitated. It sounded plausible. My dad was always changing plans last minute. "I just need to grab it real quick," he added. "I've got my truck running." Being a naive kid who wanted to be helpful, I undid the chain and let him in. "It's downstairs." I pointed to the basement door. He stepped inside. As he walked past me, I smelled stale cigarettes and something sharp, like ammonia. He didn't head for the basement immediately. He stopped in the hallway and looked around the living room. "Nice place," he muttered. "Is it just you here?" "My parents are at the store," I said quickly, realizing my mistake. "They'll be back any second." He smirked. "Right." He started walking down the basement stairs. I stayed at the top, watching him. "It's the leather one in the corner," I called down. He reached the bottom of the stairs and went out of sight. I heard him moving around. Then his voice drifted up. "Hey kid, this thing is way heavier than I thought. I can't lift it alone. Can you come give me a hand?" The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The sectional broke apart into 3 light pieces. My mom could lift them easily. There was no way he needed help. I can't," I stammered. "I have a bad back." It was a stupid lie, but it was all I had. Silence from the basement. "Just come down here for a second," he said. His voice had dropped an octave. It wasn't friendly anymore. It was a command. "No," I said, reaching for the basement door handle to close it. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps sprinting across the basement floor toward the stairs. He was charging at me. I slammed the basement door and threw the deadbolt just as his body collided with the other side. Bam! The door shook violently in the frame. "Open the door or I'm gonna kill you," he screamed, pounding on the wood. I ran. I didn't grab a phone. I didn't grab shoes. I ran out the front door across the lawn and didn't stop until I reached the gas station 3 blocks away. When the police went back to the house, the guy was gone. He had kicked the basement door open. The frame was completely splintered, but he must have realized I had escaped and fled. My parents checked their phones. No one had called them. No one had Venmo'd them. He had just seen the ad, saw the pickup-only address, and gambled that he could get inside. If I had gone down those stairs, I never would have come back up.
I was 10 years old when the renegade dance trend was huge on TikTok. I was obsessed with it. We lived in a ranch-style house in Arizona, and my room was too small to dance in, so I usually used the living room because it had a big mirrored wall. One Tuesday after school, my mom was still at work. I had the house to myself for about 2 hours. I set up my iPad on the coffee table, propped up against a stack of books, and started recording myself dancing. I did the dance probably 50 times, trying to get it perfect. I was facing the iPad, which meant the hallway and the coat closet were directly behind me. I finally got a take I liked. I sat down on the couch, out of breath, and started watching the playback. The video started normal, just me dancing offbeat to the music. But about 10 seconds in, my eyes caught movement in the background of the video. The coat closet door, which was behind my left shoulder, slowly creaked open. I froze, holding the iPad with trembling hands. I paused the video and scrubbed it back. Open, close. In the video, while I was distracted dancing, the door opened about 6 inches, and in the dark gap of the closet, I saw a pale hand gripping the door frame, and just above it, 2 eyes reflecting the light from the window. I stopped breathing. I slowly lowered the iPad and looked at the real closet door across the room. It was cracked open. I knew for a fact it was shut when I started. I sat there on the couch, paralyzed. The silence in the house was deafening. If someone was in that closet, they were staring at the back of my head right now. I didn't turn around. I pretended to still be looking at the iPad. I stood up, forcing my legs to move, and casually walked toward the sliding glass door to the backyard, like I was just going outside to get some air. As soon as my hand touched the handle, I heard the closet door creak fully open behind me. I ripped the sliding door open, sprinted into the backyard, and didn't stop running until I jumped the fence into my neighbor's yard. I pounded on their back door screaming until Mrs. Higgins let me in. She called the police. When they arrived, they searched the house. The closet was empty, but they found dirty footprints on the carpet leading from the closet to the couch where I had been sitting. Whoever it was had been standing behind the couch while I was watching the video. They were inches away from grabbing me before I stood up. They never found the person, but I never made another video in that house again. I lived in a suburb of Seattle where it rains 300 days a year. I was 13, and my parents were at a dinner party down the street. It was a torrential downpour, the kind where the rain hits the roof so hard it sounds like static. I was in my bedroom on the 2nd floor, playing Xbox with my headset on. My room had a slanted ceiling because it was built directly under the roofline. Around 9 p.m., I took my headset off to go get a drink. That's when I heard it. Thump, thump, slide. It was coming from the ceiling, directly above my head.
At first, I thought it was a large branch hitting the house, but then it happened again. Stomp, stomp, stomp. It sounded like footsteps. Someone was walking on the roof. I stood on my bed and pressed my ear against the slanted ceiling. I could hear the shingles crunching. Someone was pacing back and forth right over my dormer window. I was terrified, but also confused. Who climbs onto a slippery, steep roof in the middle of a thunderstorm? I ran downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed a steak knife, my weapon of choice. I stood in the hallway, listening. Then I saw a face upside down in the living room window. I screamed and jumped back. Someone was hanging off the gutter, swinging back and forth, peering into the living room. They were wearing a black ski mask. They slapped the glass with a gloved hand. Bang, bang, bang. Come out, a muffled voice yelled through the glass. The house is on fire, come out. I froze. I sniffed the air. No smoke, no alarms. He was lying. He was trying to panic me so I would unlock the door and run outside. He swung away from the window, and I heard him scramble back up onto the roof, scrape, thump. Then I heard a massive crash from the chimney. We had an old-fashioned fireplace in the living room, wide enough for a person. Soot and dust exploded into the room. He wasn't waiting for me to come out anymore. He was coming down the chimney. I saw a pair of black boots drop into the fireplace grate, kicking up a cloud of ash. I didn't stay to fight. I sprinted to the garage, hit the opener, and rolled under the garage door before it was even fully open. I ran into the pouring rain, straight down the middle of the street to where my parents were. By the time my dad and the neighbors ran back to the house, the guy was gone, but the living room was covered in soot footprints. The police said it was a method called flushing. They scare the kid out of the house so an accomplice waiting in the bushes can grab them. If I had opened that front door, I would have walked right into a trap.
I was 13 years old when this happened, living in a quiet suburb just outside of Columbus, Ohio. It was the middle of July, dead of summer, and both of my parents worked full-time jobs. My older sister was away at band camp, so for the first time in my life, I had the house completely to myself from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. At that age, being home alone was the ultimate luxury. I could eat whatever I wanted, blast the TV, and spend hours playing Halo 3 online without my mom nagging me to go outside. It was around 11:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was in the living room, sitting on the floor with my back against the sofa, headset on, fully immersed in a match. Our living room had a large bay window that looked out onto the front porch and the driveway. I usually kept the blinds closed to stop the glare on the TV, but there was a small gap where the sunlight sliced through, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I heard a heavy knocking at the front door. Not a doorbell ring, but a thick, meaty fist pounding on the wood. I froze. My parents had a strict rule: if we aren't expecting anyone, you don't answer. I stayed quiet, pausing my game, waiting for them to leave. The knocking came again, louder this time, impatient. I crawled on my hands and knees toward the bay window and peeked through the slat in the blinds. Standing on the porch was a man. He was big, maybe 6'2", heavyset, wearing a generic bright orange safety vest over a dirty white t-shirt. He held a clipboard, but he wasn't writing anything. He was leaning close to the door, trying to listen. I saw a white van parked in front of our driveway. No logos, no City Electric or Comcast decals, just a rusted white panel van with mud flapped up on the wheel wells. He knocked a third time, and then he shouted, "Gas company, need to check the meter for a leak." His voice was gruff, aggressive. I knew our gas meter was in the backyard behind the fence. If he really needed to check it, he wouldn't need to come through the front door. He could just walk around. My gut twisted. I stayed silent, holding my breath. After a few seconds, I saw him step back off the porch. I thought he was leaving, but instead of walking to his van, he walked onto the grass and started moving along the side of the house toward the backyard gate. My heart hammered against my ribs. I crawled backward, scrambled to my feet, and ran to the kitchen at the back of the house. We had a sliding glass door that led to the deck. I had locked it earlier, but I needed to double check. I reached the kitchen just as I saw the top of his head bobbing past the kitchen window. He was in the backyard. I ducked behind the kitchen island, heart rate spiking to 180.
I heard the distinct clack-clack of the sliding door handle being yanked up and down. He was trying to get in. He wasn't checking a meter. He was checking locks. I realized I had left my cell phone upstairs in my bedroom on the charger. The house line was on the wall in the kitchen, but if I stood up to grab it, he would see me through the glass. The handle rattled violently, then silence. I waited, sweating, my hands shaking against the cool linoleum floor. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the basement window well just below the kitchen window, the sound of glass shattering. He had kicked in the basement window. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my system. I heard the heavy foot of boots hitting the concrete floor of our basement. He was inside. I didn't think, I just reacted. I couldn't go upstairs. The stairs were right by the basement door. He'd cut me off. I couldn't go out the back. I bolted for the pantry. It was a narrow walk-in closet filled with shelves of canned food and cereal. I squeezed myself into the farthest corner, behind a shelf of 12 packs of soda, and pulled the door shut, leaving just a hairline crack. I heard the heavy footsteps coming up the basement stairs. Thump, thump, thump. They stopped at the top of the stairs. The kitchen was dead silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. "Hello?" the voice called out. It sounded different now, mocking. "I know you're in here, kid. I saw the TV on." I clamped my mouth over, tears hot in my eyes. He walked into the kitchen. I could hear his boots crunching on the small pieces of glass he must have tracked up from the basement. He opened a drawer. Silverware rattled. He slammed it shut. He was looking for a weapon. He walked right past the pantry door. I saw a sliver of that orange vest through the crack. He stopped in the hallway. I heard him pick up the house phone. I prayed he was dialing out, but then I heard him smash the receiver against the wall over and over again until it cracked. He was cutting off my communication. He started walking toward the living room. "Come on out, buddy. I just want the Xbox. You won't get hurt." I knew he was lying. You don't break a phone if you're just there for an Xbox. While he was in the living room disconnecting my console, I made the riskiest decision of my life. The side door to the garage was inside the kitchen, about 10 feet from the pantry. I waited for the sound of cords being ripped out. Rip. I pushed the pantry door open silently. I stepped out, socks sliding on the floor. I took 3 long strides to the garage door, grabbed the knob, twisted it, and threw myself inside the garage. I didn't care about the noise now. I hit the button for the garage door opener, but it was too slow. I unlocked the side personnel door of the garage and sprinted out onto the driveway into the blinding sunlight. I didn't look back. I ran across the lawn, screaming at the top of my lungs. "Help! Call 911! Help!" I ran straight to my neighbor Mr. Henderson's house across the street. He was washing his car. He saw me, pale, screaming, shoeless, and dropped his sponge. "There's a man in my house!" I screamed. Mr. Henderson was a big guy, an ex-Marine. He told his wife to call the cops and grabbed a tire iron from his bucket. But by the time we looked back at my house, the white van was peeling out of the driveway, tires screeching, speeding down the block. The police arrived 5 minutes later. They found the basement window shattered and my Xbox sitting by the front door, ready to be taken. But the scariest part wasn't what he took, it was what he left. On the kitchen counter, right where I had been hiding, they found a roll of duct tape and a box cutter that didn't belong to us. He hadn't brought those to steal a game console. He had brought them for me. I'm 28 years old now, and I still check the locks on my windows 3 times before I go to sleep.
I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where snow day didn't mean a few inches. It meant 3 feet of powder and roads that weren't plowed for days. We lived on 5 acres of land, surrounded by dense pine woods. Our nearest neighbor was a mile down the road. I was 15 at the time. My parents had driven into town for an anniversary dinner. They were supposed to be back by 10 p.m., but a massive blizzard hit out of nowhere around 8. The snow was coming down in sheets, whiteout conditions. My dad called the landline and told me they were going to stay at a motel in town because the roads were too dangerous to drive. So I was alone, isolated in a 2-story farmhouse in the middle of a blizzard. I wasn't scared at first. I loved the snow. I made some hot cocoa, turned off the main lights, and watched the storm rage outside the sliding glass door in the dining room.
The yard light was on, a high-powered floodlight mounted on the barn about 50 yards away. It cast this eerie, long shadow across the snow. Around 11 p.m., the power died. The hum of the refrigerator cut out. The TV clicked off. The house plunged into total, suffocating darkness. I sighed, grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer, and went to the dining room window to see if the barn light was out too. It was. The world outside was pitch black, except for the faint gray luminescence of the snow itself. I shined my flashlight through the glass, just checking the accumulation. The beam cut through the falling flakes and hit the deck. My stomach dropped. There were footprints, fresh, deep boot prints in the snow. They started from the edge of the woods and walked straight up the stairs to the deck. They stopped right at the sliding glass door I was standing in front of. I moved the light frantically, searching for where they went next. There were no footprints leading away. Whoever walked up those stairs was still on the deck. I backed away from the glass, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I locked the deadbolt, or I checked it. It was already locked. Thank God. I stood there in the dark kitchen, listening. The wind was howling, rattling the siding of the house, which masked any other noise. Then I heard it, a slow screech against the glass. I shined my flashlight back at the door. A face was pressed against the glass. It wasn't a monster. It was a man. He was pale, gaunt, with matted, wet hair plastered to his forehead. His skin was pressed so hard against the cold glass that his nose and lips were white and flattened. His eyes were open wide, unblinking, staring right into the beam of my flashlight. I screamed. I dropped the flashlight and scrambled backward, knocking a chair over. When I picked the light up and aimed it back at the door, the face was gone. I didn't wait to see if he would come back. I ran. I sprinted up the stairs to my parents' bedroom because it had the heaviest door and a phone. I slammed the door, locked it, and pushed their heavy oak dresser in front of it. I grabbed the phone. Dead. The phone lines were down from the storm. I had no cell service out there in 2009. I was completely cut off. I sat in the corner of the room, clutching a baseball bat my dad kept under the bed, shivering from the cold and the fear. Downstairs, I heard the sound of shattering glass, the sliding door. The wind roared into the house, carrying the sound of heavy, wet boots stomping on the hardwood floor. Crunch, crunch, crunch. He wasn't rushing. He was taking his time. I heard him opening doors downstairs, the pantry, the bathroom, the coat closet. He was searching. Then the footsteps started coming up the stairs. The old wooden steps creaked under his weight. Creak, step, creak, step. He reached the landing. I held my breath, tears streaming down my face. I heard him check my bedroom door. It was empty. Then the guest room. Then the handle of my parents' bedroom door jiggled. The lock held. He jiggled it harder, violently rattling the door in the frame. Then he stopped. "I know you're in there," a voice rasped. It sounded wet, like he had fluid in his lungs. "It's cold out here. Let me in." I didn't answer. I gripped the bat so hard my knuckles turned white. The doorknob turned again. Then a heavy thud as he threw his shoulder against the door. The dresser scraped an inch across the floor. He hit it again. Thud. The wood around the lock frame splintered. I looked at the window. We were on the second floor, but there was a snowdrift below, piled high against the side of the house. It was a 20-foot drop, but the snow might break my fall. Thud. The door cracked. A hand reached through the splintered wood, fumbling for the dresser to push it away. I didn't think. I unlatched the window, shoved it up, and climbed onto the sill. The freezing wind bit into my skin. As the bedroom door burst open and the dresser toppled over, I jumped. I fell into the darkness, landing deep in the snowbank. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and the cold was instant and paralyzing. But I scrambled up, wading through waist-deep snow, running towards the woods where our ATV trail was. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road, a mile away. A snowplow driver saw me waving frantically and picked me up. When the police went back to the house with my parents the next morning, the man was gone, but they found something that made my blood run cold. In the living room, he had piled up all of our winter coats and blankets into a nest in the center of the floor, and on the kitchen table, laid out in a row, were 5 kitchen knives. He hadn't just come in for warmth. He had come in to hunt. They never caught him. To this day, when it snows, I can't look out the windows at night. I'm afraid I'll see those footprints again. This happened during my sophomore year of college. I was renting an old, run-down bungalow with 2 roommates, Sarah and Mike. It was a cheap place near campus. Drafty windows, creaky floors, and a weird smell that never quite went away. It was Thanksgiving break. Sarah and Mike had both driven home to see their families, but I had to stay behind to work retail shifts for Black Friday, so I was alone in this creaky old house for 4 days. The first 2 nights were fine, just boring, but on the 3rd night, things got weird. I was lying in bed around 2 a.m., scrolling through my phone. My room was on the ground floor. The house had no basement, just a crawl space that ran underneath the foundation. The access to the crawl space was supposed to be outside, a little wooden door in the backyard lattice. I heard a scratching sound. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall, right behind my headboard. I knocked on the wall with my knuckle. "Shut up," I whispered, assuming it was a raccoon or a rat. The scratching stopped immediately. That gave me a chill. Usually animals don't stop just because you knock. They scurry away. This felt responsive. I tried to ignore it and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and the house felt colder than usual. I walked into the kitchen and noticed the back door was unlocked. I specifically remembered locking it. I blamed my tired brain. Maybe I forgot. I locked it again and went to work. When I came home that evening, the vibe in the house was heavy. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and you feel like you just interrupted a conversation? It felt like that. The air was still. Dust boats were settling. I went to my room to change out of my work uniform. I opened my closet to grab a hoodie. The floor of my closet was usually covered in shoes and laundry baskets, but the laundry basket had been moved. It was pushed to the side, and there, cut into the floorboards of the closet, something I had never noticed before because of the clutter, was a square wooden hatch. It was a trapdoor, and it was slightly ajar, propped open about an inch. My blood ran cold. I knelt down, my heart pounding in my ears. I saw scratch marks on the wood around the edges, fresh ones. I grabbed a flashlight from my desk. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I pulled the hatch open. It groaned on rusty hinges. A smell hit me. Damp earth, mold, and something else. Something distinct. Old Spice cologne and unwashed sweat. I shined the light down into the black hole. It was a dirt crawl space, maybe 3 feet high. The beam of light swept across the dirt. There were trash bags down there, fast food wrappers, empty water bottles. And in the far corner, right beneath where my bed would be, was a sleeping bag. It was unrolled. There was a pillow, and sitting on top of the pillow was a photo. I squinted, leaning in closer. It was a Polaroid. It was a picture of me, sleeping, taken from the closet doorway. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone wasn't just living down there. They were coming up into my room while I slept. Suddenly, from the darkness of the crawl space, just beyond where my light reached, I heard a sound, a sniff. Then a rasping voice whispered, "You have pretty skin." I slammed the hatch shut. I threw my heavy laundry basket on top of it. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't change my clothes. I grabbed my car keys and sprinted out of the house. I drove to the police station, my hands shaking so bad I could barely steer. When the cops searched the house, they found the man still down there. He'd quartered himself in the back of the crawl space with a knife. It took 2 officers and a taser to drag him out. He was a drifting transient who had been living under our house for months. The police found peepholes drilled into the floorboards of the bathroom and my bedroom. He had been watching us every day. The scariest part, when they developed the film from a disposable camera they found in his bag, there were pictures of me and my roommates dating back to August. He was there when we moved in. He was the weird smell that never went away. I moved out the next day. I don't care about the security deposit. I can't sleep in a room with a closet anymore.